So I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Rajesh Vaishampayan, who is head of global OSS at Rakuten Symphony, to talk to me about why OSS has proved such a tough nut to crack. Welcome to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie. Thanks for having me. I hope you can hear me properly.
Yes, it's fine. Thank you. So maybe we could start off with your thoughts about why you think OSS has proved so difficult to modernize. And also, why is it so key that operators update OSS?
I think the important part on the whole piece of OSS, there are many dimensions into the OSS part. I can think of several ones which cause a bit of a grief for operators. So obviously, if I look at from a top-down approach, the management commitment is absolutely important. I think the important part would be to have the top management commit themselves to the transformation of the OSS. And I think Tarek Amin in Rakuten has been a leader in this space. He's so passionate about ensuring that the entire OSS area is absolutely impeccable in terms of automation, in terms of the functionality, the feature sets, the architecture. So I think that part is important. Once that is done, then everything else will follow. So obviously, the OSS area is challenging from multifold. One is that it has a fairly complex ecosystem of applications. So if you look at the entire OSS stack, so the entire FCAPS, the entire ITSM part, the entire data analytics part, the reporting part, there are so many different applications, and they sort of need to talk to each other, right? And you have, because you have so much of fragmented ecosystem of applications, the underlying architecture itself is very complex because you now need to connect all these different applications with a spaghetti kind of connectivity, and then the data which is going across different applications. So inherently, there is what is called as data fragmentation across multiple applications. So that also poses a lot of problem for operators to start seeing everything in a unified way, right? So every operator is trying to do that with building a big data platform. So you need to have a unified data model. Individual applications have their own workflows. So there is a workflow isolation between the applications. So multiple users who are actually trying to do a lot of things cannot do that in an integrated way, but in a fragmented way where there is a visibility problem as well. And when you have so many complex systems and applications, the moment you want to enhance certain applications in one particular area, the functionality propagation across systems is also very complex because these are all moving parts, right? So if you change certain things in one application, it has a ripple effect on the other application. So the interface needs to be updated. You need to understand the complexity of individual product roadmaps. You have to do multi-vendor management. So now you have, whatever number of applications that you have in the system. So many vendors you have to manage them. All these licensing contracts needs to be aligned. One application is going out of life. How do we, introduce new application, the underlying data model for it, the technology advancements, product choices. Oh my God, I can just name some of these top areas where it causes sort of a nightmare. And I align with what Enrique Blanco is saying. It's definitely a tough nut to crack for sure. And it's tough. I mean, it's really tough. I mean, we have had our shares of challenges within Rakuten as we evolve, but we're now there as an integrated OSS platform.
Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase what I think is Rakuten's approach to OSS. So you can tell me whether I got it wrong or not. And then maybe you can enlarge on it. So my understanding is that you kind of look at the trajectory to evolve OSS, starting from kind of single domain and single vendor. And then the next kind of middle stage is a single domain and multi-vendor. And then the multi-domain, multi-vendor is kind of the end game. And you see that as a kind of equivalent of being greenfield. So that's my understanding of kind of how Rakuten thought about this, because in Japan, you didn't just go into 5G, you started with 4G and then built out. So, yeah.
Absolutely spot on. I think you need to be an OSS architect yourself because you've got it absolutely spot on. So, the whole idea of trying to move from a brownfield to greenfield, everybody wants to be in a greenfield kind of an environment, right? Say, I have no baggage. I don't have to, do anything with the older legacy. And how do I really carry this baggage and make sure that it's all gets unified, right? So, as you rightly said, managing at a very low risk level, which is the single domain, single vendor, and being able to understand the various dimensions of how the OSS can be integrated, right? So if you look at some of the focus areas that the operator probably is already undergoing, right? It's not really a rocket science, but essentially the network layer itself, because the network layer itself is complicated. There are legacy technologies, there are new technologies, there are evolving technologies. That all technologies are coming into the environment, and all the different management tools which are bringing in all this fault data, performance data, configuration data into various different systems. So if you look at trying to build a unified model, or the entire end-to-end observability framework, including all the FCAPs, which is fault performance, configuration, and all the other aspects of managing the entire integrated inventory. And then, sort of stitching everything with like a closed loop automation, because now you have all the different elements stitched together properly, and then you have a closed loop automation, which will then start driving an operator towards the integrated service management. So an operator, typically a brownfield operator, the way you would see the brownfield operator is moving from a heterogeneous network management environment to an integrated network management environment to a unified service management environment. So that's the ultimate goal. And if you take that journey for an operator, as you rightly said, moving from a single vendor to single vendor, single domain to single domain, multi-vendor to multi-vendor, multi-domain, right? So that journey starts then becoming very important. And this allows also, the operator to sort of de-risk the whole situation, because now you have a lean CapEx and OpEx model, because now you're focusing on certain areas. You're also trying to build a cookie cutter model, maybe for a particular region, and then you're building on top of that to scale nationally. And then have the success ensured at a smaller scale, so the organization also adopts, because a lot of struggle actually for operators is to make sure that the new automation tools are adopted, because people are more familiar with using previous tools, and adoption also is very important. So now the process changes, the whole UI UX changes. So a lot of challenges for the organization to adopt to the newer ways of integrated working. But yes, as you rightly said, if an operator, brownfield operator, can focus on, and this is what we have been also validating out with so many different operators globally, and they like the model, they like the approach, and that's probably the way operators should evolve in transforming. And this is a journey; it's not a switch, unfortunately. So you have to try use cases by use cases and start really building that journey. But you have to make a start somewhere, and to make that start from a single domain, single vendor to then migrating to a multi-domain, multi-vendor starts becoming that much more de-risked approach, and make sure that you're scaling up to a large extent.
So Rajesh, what do you think are good use cases to begin the journey with? What are things that are perhaps less terrifying than some of the others?
Yeah, so if you look at the start of the whole process in the journey is maybe introduction of or network rollout, right? Because every operator is rolling out network elements. Now 5G is being rolled out. Tomorrow 6G will be rolled out. So the network rollout is an extremely important area where you start seeing the benefit of moving towards an integrated automation during the rollout itself. So network rollout automation starts becoming very, very important and a key aspect to the success. Because once you know that this is the new technology that you want to move in, and then the entire backend database, for example, the entire inventory for the new technology, the entire FCAPS model for that, the entire connectivity, the provisioning, the assurance, all those areas can get kickstarted by network automation. I think that could be a start, and within that itself, then you focus on only one vendor, one domain, maybe one cluster to start with, and then scale, because it's a matter of scaling, and you can't attack this animal in different varieties, because it's an elephant, right? So if you touch the legs, somebody can just only see the legs, not the whole elephant. So that's how you break it down and start really managing in an approach where it is a scalable model.
Okay, I really, because I'm a journalist, I always like to know what happened when things went wrong, or were there things that proved harder than you expected? I suspect there were many things that proved harder than expected. It's the nature of things, but I just wonder if there were one or two things you might be able to share.
Okay, yeah, of course. I mean, we didn't have sort of a very simple journey for sure. So we had our own share of difficulties, but obviously because luckily we started off with an InnoEye platform, the company that we acquired last year. We had already an integrated functionality in the platform. So we already had the closed loop automation. We already had that FCAPS automation. It was based on big data. So everything was going good, because everything was sort of integrated. What we needed to improve on, because some of the areas where we wanted to make sure that it starts becoming scalable, and that's where some of the areas we improved on was making the platform cloud native. So while it was still cloud native, but this is like working towards the next level of Kubernetes-based architecture, where you start, making sure that all the applications are not monolithic applications and all microservices based, so that you have scalability, interoperability between applications. Individual applications can scale, because today, for example, if you have FCAPS, fault management itself is a big domain by itself, right? Because there's so many things to be done in that. So if you create that as a microservices-based architecture, then you can horizontally scale, because now you can bring in multi vendors to manage that. But you can also vertically scale from a functionality without disrupting the adjacent apps. What used to happen before is, because it was monolithic, there was a lot of time which was taken to develop the functionality and to be able to propagate across, because still, while it was scalable platform, you still start seeing those challenges. So moving from the traditional architecture to the microservices architecture, I think that helped quite a bit. And because of that, the underlying database, scaled up version of unified data model started becoming even more resilient, because that allowed us to scale hardware infrastructure also very quickly. Because otherwise, if you have the traditional hardware infrastructure and not Kubernetes based, then dynamic scaling is a limitation. So you cannot scale up that quickly as you can scale with the Kubernetes based environment. So these were some of the challenges that we faced in our evolution journey. So we had our own share of brownfield earlier, because being an MNO earlier in the past, but we managed to start migrating those functionalities into this InnoEye-based platform. So we had, I would say, a little bit of advantage. We were not, in a disadvantage mode actually. So we were a little better off that way.
And do you think you could say a little bit about microservices? Because my impression often is that because microservices are inherent in the cloud native environment, it feels like almost they're guaranteed to work out properly. But I think actually there are some real dangers lurking for people with microservices if they're not deployed in a consistent fashion and in a thoughtful fashion. I think it's easy to move from a monolithic application to a microservices-based one that's more expensive and doesn't run that well. So
Yep.
I mean, the execution is the absolute, the theory is good, it's how you do it that matters. And
Yep.
I just wondered if you could elaborate a bit on the issues, maybe.
I think spot on, because, as you start the microservices architecture, there are inherent messaging and communication challenges that you face between different applications, right? So what we have managed to do is we have managed to standardize on the interfaces. So we have all the applications running standard TMF based models, so that
TM Forum.
TM forum based, yeah, TMF based, TM forum based, interfaces, so that we are standardizing on them. So we are not developing any kind of hardcore, anything of proprietary nature of doing things, right? So we have so many open source components. We have everything based on Kubernetes nodes. We have communication infrastructure between the microservices talking on a standardized interface. So these are some of the areas where we have ensured that, some of the traditional challenges that are faced in this particular way, we are able to mitigate them effectively.
Okay, so standardization and consistency are absolutely key.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've talked about automation. I'm just wondering, how far do you feel that we are away from being in a really well automated environment as opposed to an autonomous environment? I mean, right. and I guess that's kind of that's the aim, is we can let the network get on with it.
Exactly. No, I think excellent question. So, fundamentally, automation has several different dimensions. One is automation of the functionality. So that's part of the individual OSS functionality. So automating that part, where you make comprehensive functional areas where you start automating. The second part of automation is to be able to trigger certain workflows in a closed loop manner, so that you, for example, if you have faults or performances, triggers which create work orders, create tickets. So those level of internal workflows needs to be automated, and those automations are complex, because if you look at the way, if you want to actually change certain network settings on a dynamic level based on SON architecture and so on and so forth, you will start seeing those workflows being complex, and they need to follow certain path, and that path needs to be either governed, which means that if it's a manual automation for issuing work orders on the field for the staff to go and replace something, those need certain level of governance. So all the authorizations within the workflows, all the automation within the workflows. So that's one level of automation that starts becoming critical. The third level of automation is from a provisioning or a configuration point of view. So when you talk about deploying network in the field, and for example, if you switch on the power of a newly installed base station, whether it's 4G or a 5G, how do you automate the entire backend to make it like a zero-touch provisioning, right? So those are additional areas of automation where you start seeing results. So typically when you deploy networks, so instead of several weeks or months of being able to activate, the kind of zero-touch provisioning that you can build allows you to activate within minutes rather than even days or weeks. So various different dimensions of automation. So I think this automation of any kind of sort of transactional elements is also very important. So for example, you have classic audits or troubleshoots or upgrades, whatever you do in the in your network, you can actually automate the execution of that. So you can identify anything which is transactional, anything which is repetitive, and anything which is expensive. So if you look at these three dimensions, and then you say that, okay, I would like to automate all these areas and build a framework around that, so that you're not coding, but you're actually configuring. You can build templates, you can build aspects of this automation in a framework where I don't have to, bring in a vendor to be able to do that. The working level team itself can build the automation, and they can follow a life cycle model. So obviously, not all automations you need to make sure that they're all persistent every time. So you can build those automations, have governance, somebody validate that, somebody clear it, somebody authorize it. And then at some point in time, you may delete those automations because you don't need them anymore. So the entire life cycle of automation is also very, very important, and that you can build within the platform and you can scale up that significantly. So
I like that. A life
areas.
cycle of automation. I also think, given that we talk so much about automation being a goal, the idea that there will be a life when we can get rid of some of it is a very nice thought.
Exactly. And then once you start automating this, then areas and use cases where you can start moving to from traditional automation to autonomy, because you know that after you have done this automation, hey, I don't need to babysit this automation anymore, right? So I can actually move towards making it autonomous. And if it is repetitive and if it is going to be in the system for a long time, we can move towards making it autonomous. So everything is automated in the system. So the data comes in, the rules are designed, and then you just go ahead and do whatever is required to be done on the network or customer experience side. So that's how you move from traditional automation to autonomy. But that's a journey again. You cannot, go to autonomy straight away and jump into it. Everybody would love to do that, but there are certain basic things that you need to achieve initially to be able to move to autonomy.
To my great regret, we're out of time.
Sure.
If you could just say, pick one thing that is the biggest reward of getting OSS fit for today and tomorrow's purposes, what do you think that's biggest benefit is?
Okay, now you're putting me on the spot.
Maybe agility. That was me, wasn't it? I'm just thinking maybe agility or cost or time to market, customer experience.
Yeah, there are actually multiple bullets. They're not one single silver bullet or one golden bullet. But there are several areas of it. And if you look at, trying to manage this part, if you look at from a commercial angle, obviously cost is a very important element. So I think cost, if you have an integrated OSS and if you want to make it fit for purpose, not just today, but tomorrow, because now if you have a framework like this, you can tomorrow integrate newer technologies with an increased velocity, right? You don't have to wait, you just integrate, right? So I think cost is one element of it. Customer experience, obviously, because now you don't have too many vendors, too many products to manage, so you can focus on network and customer experience. So cost and network and customer experience would be probably the top two things which will make it fit for purpose.
Okay, thank you so much. Great session.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much indeed.